Thank you. The vaccine saved millions of lives, and I want to thank you for your support and engagement on that. However, despite statements to the contrary, it did not stop transmission of the virus. Did the COVID vaccine stop transmission of the virus?
That is a complicated issue because in the beginning, the first iteration of the vaccines did have an effect, not 100%, not a high effect. They did prevent infection and subsequently, obviously, transmission. However, it's important to point out something that we did not know early on that became evident as the months went by, is that the durability of protection against infection and hence transmission was relatively limited, whereas the duration of protection against severe disease, hospitalization, and deaths was more prolonged. We did not know that in the beginning. In the beginning, it was felt that, in fact, it did prevent infection and thus transmission. But that was proven as time went by to not be a durable effect.
You've been a scientist and a scientific administrator for 54 years. Is that right? More than a half century? And
correct.
You were director of the National Institute of Allergies and Infectious Diseases for more than 3 decades. Is that right?
38 plus years.
38 years. Okay. And I assume that you've never been accused of trying to start a disease before. Is that right?
That is correct.
You have devoted your life to fighting infectious diseases for the American people. Is that right?
That is correct.
According to Dr. Deborah Birx, Donald Trump's own COVID-19 advisor, America unnecessarily lost hundreds of thousands of people because of the recklessness and indifference of Donald Trump and his administration. Now the people who brought you the political big lie, claiming absurdly that Trump won the 2020 election, which he lost by more than 7 million votes, now bring you the medical big lie, making the outlandish claim that Dr. Fauci was responsible for causing COVID-19. Using the select subcommittee as a platform for this disinformation, House Republicans now find themselves in the familiar position where their own investigation debunks their runaway political rhetoric. Just like the broader committee's impeachment drive proved only that there were no presidential crimes, much less high crimes and misdemeanors attributable to Joe Biden, the investigation of Dr. Fauci shows he is an honorable public servant who has devoted his entire career to the public health and the public interest, and he is not a comic book supervillain. He did not fund research to create the COVID-19 pandemic. He did not lie to Congress about gain-of-function research in Wuhan. And he did not organize a lab leak suppression campaign. Today, Dr. Fauci's testimony, along with the thousands of pages of documents and dozens of closed-door testimony provided to House Republicans as part of the COVID origins investigation, will dispel these hysterical claims and reveal that the people bowing down to a twice-impeached convicted felon who told Americans to inject themselves with bleach now want you to believe not only a big political lie, but a big medical lie, too. I want to go back to this email that you cited in your opening, because I think it goes right to the heart of this campaign of character assassination against you. The claim was essentially that you tried to cover up the possibility of there having been a laboratory leak, which, of course, is perfectly possible. And if this committee were doing its job, we could actually be working to advance the investigation of that. But they would rather assert that you tried to cover up this possibility. Here's the email that you sent on February 1st at 12:38 a.m. To Christian Anderson, with a copy to Christian Anderson, but you sent it to Professor Jeremy Farrar. Jeremy, I just got off the phone with Christian Anderson, and he related to me his concern about the furin site mutation in the spike protein of the currently circulating 2019 nCoV. I told him that as soon as possible, he and Eddie Holmes should get a group of evolutionary biologists together to carefully examine the data to determine if his concerns are validated. He should do this very quickly. And if everyone agrees with this concern, they should report it to the appropriate authorities. I would imagine that in the USA, this would be the FBI. And in the UK, it would be MI5. It would be important to quickly get confirmation of the cause of his concern by experts in the field of coronaviruses and evolutionary biology. In the meantime, I will alert my U.S. government official colleagues of my conversation with you and Christian and determine what further investigation they recommend. Let us stay in touch. Best regards, Tony. Was this the email where you were putatively trying to cover up the possibility of a lab leak?
Yes, Congressman Raskin, and that's the reason why I mentioned in my opening statement that is it inconceivable that anyone could get out of that I was covering anything up.
Would you have any reason to cover up any new scientific evidence relating to the origins of the COVID-19 virus?
Absolutely not, and that's the reason why it was important to get people together to discuss this in a transparent way.
Have you spent your...
Yield back.
Yep.
Now recognize the chairman of the full committee, Mr. Comer from Kentucky, for 5 minutes of question.
Thank you. Dr. Fauci, in your opening statement, you attempt to distance yourself from your previous senior advisor, Dr. Moran's. You say that Dr. Moran's title was just made up, that he was not an advisor to you, and that his office was in a different building. So, Dr. Fauci, did Dr. Moran's report directly to you?
Actually, I'm not sure exactly what the on-paper report is. He is senior advisor to the director, but it is conceivable we can get that information. He might have reported through someone lower, like my deputy.
So your senior advisor did not report directly to you?
There are very few people who report directly to me.
Okay, Dr. Moran's testified that he could walk into your office anytime he wanted to. Is that true?
No, that's not true. You don't just walk into the office. I mean, he's there. I mean, it's conceivable that
Did he ever walk into your office?
I would say he did occasionally, but the idea, can I finish the answer to you, sir?
No, because I've got a lot of questions.
Okay.
Dr. Fauci, did you ever delete an official record?
No.
Dr. Fauci, did you ever conduct official business via email?
To the best of my recollection and knowledge, I have never conducted official business via my private email.
So there's a troubling pattern of behavior from your inner circle, not just Dr. Moran's, but also your chief of staff, Mr. Folkers. Do you agree that it violates NAID policy to use personal email for official purposes?
The Dr. Moran's issue that was discussed by this committee violates NIH policy, yes.
But does using official email, using a personal email for official business, does that violate policy?
Using a personal email for official business violates NIH policy.
Does it violate NIAID policy to delete records to intentionally avoid FOIA?
Yes.
Okay. On April 28, 2020, Dr. Moran's edited an EcoHealth press release regarding the grant termination. Does that violate policy?
That was inappropriate for him to be doing that for a grantee as a conflict of interest, among other things.
So on March 29, 2021, Dr. Moran's edited a letter that Dr. Dasick was sending to NIH. Does that violate policy?
Yes, it does.
On October 25, 2021, Dr. Moran's provided Dr. Dasick with advice regarding how to mislead NIH on EcoHealth's late progress report. Does that violate policy?
That was wrong and inappropriate and violated policy.
On December 7, 2021, Dr. Moran's wrote to the chair of EcoHealth's board of directors to, quote, put in a word, end quote, for Dr. Dasick. Does that violate policy?
Should not have done that. That was wrong.
And that violates policy?
Well, I'm not sure of a specific policy, but I imagine it does violate policy. He should not have been doing that.
In addition to all those actions, Dr. Moran's wrote to Dr. Dasick, quote, Peter, from Tony's numerous recent comments to me, they are trying to protect you, end quote. Did you ever talk to Dr. Moran's about Dr. Dasick or EcoHealth Alliance?
I can tell you, regarding what you said, I never spoke about protecting him. I mean, obviously, we knew that Dasick was a grantee, so I may have mentioned and discussed Dr. Dasick because he's a grantee, but I never spoke about protecting him.
You're testifying that he just made that up.
Excuse me?
You're testifying that Dr. Moran's just made that up.
I don't know where he got that, but that's not true.
So by this point, Dr. Fauci, when these emails were written, you should have known that Dr. Daszak was more than 2 years late on a required progress report with his grant. Dr. Daszak conducted an experiment that resulted in a novel virus showing excess growth, that Dr. Daszak failed to report that experiment, that Dr. Daszak was protecting the Wuhan lab and not sharing its lab notebooks, and that Dr. Daszak failed to disclose obvious conflicts of interest. So why were you trying to protect Dr. Daszak and EcoHealth Alliance?
I repeat on the record, I have not tried to protect Dr. Daszak. And that's number one. Number two, you said something that's not true, because I did not know about the compliance issues until well after the fact, when I was being briefed for going to before a congressional committee. So it wasn't as these things were going on, I knew that he was withholding.
Did you know about Dr. Moran's close relationship with Dr. Daszak?
Dr. Moran's made it clear that Dr. Daszak was his friend. I did not engage in any of that interaction between them.
And just lastly, if I may, Mr. Chair, you testified and answered the chairman's question that you never had any communication with the intelligence community throughout all of COVID. Did I understand that correctly?
No, you heard wrong. I said I did have communication. I was briefed by the intelligence community multiple times during the COVID issue.
And you never...
The gentleman's time has expired. I now recognize the ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Raskin from Maryland, for 5 minutes of questions.
Okay, first, Dr.